Exhibit 21. That's a video.
Yeah, thanks. Got it.
It's very much faster.
I hope so.
We gotta use them because I have no idea how to do it.
I hope so.
I've been doing it for like years. How long have you been?
It's too long. 30 something? Yeah.
Are you retiring?
Trying to. No, I'm not taking
Finish
one.
up the other cases that you have. I'm not taking
Not a bunch. I've been trying for 2 years to do this. Most. Yeah. Oh. Horrible case. Oh, yeah.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. Please be seated. Okay, continue when you're ready, Mr. Osser.
Mr. Fredericks, I asked you, well, I think we left off discussing Exhibit 21, or at least 21 contained in one of the several others that you created. But can we go to Exhibit 21 for us?
Yes.
And just to orient the jury, this is the second McDowell video, is that right?
Yes.
Can we just zoom it in and play it through, and then I'll ask you some questions based on what we see and hear in this video, okay?
Okay, I'll zoom it in a little bit, but it might, if the activity that's on video goes out of the zoom section, I'll have to stop it.
Oh, that's fine. Yeah.
Okay.
Certainly make it so we can see what's being depicted.
Okay. And this is starting from the beginning.
Thank you, sir.
Behind your back. You're gonna get it again. Put your hands behind your back. Hands behind your back. Put your hands behind.
All right, and that's the entirety of the video.
It
that
is,
right?
yes.
Okay, and in that video, before he broke, it appears as though Mr. Ellis is kind of on his left side. Is that fair?
Yes.
And that Officer Collins is behind him, or at least on Mr. Ellis's back area. Or near the back area.
Behind him, yes.
Okay, and Officer Burbank is kind of towards the legs of Mr. Ellis. Is that right?
Kind of straddled over him with control of Mr. Ellis's hand.
Okay. And we hear in the video 4 separate times that Officer Collins says, "Put your hands behind your back." Did you hear those 4?
There were a number.
Okay.
Yeah, 3 or 4.
But whatever's contained in there, you hear that?
Yes.
Okay.
And there's another statement.
Or you'll get it again.
Yes.
Referencing the taser application.
That's what I assume, yes.
Well, you actually put 21 into both 546 and 443 with the taser application in the red. Do you remember doing that?
Yes.
And so what we heard there coincided with after the second taser application. Would you agree with that?
Yes, then there's the statement, I'm sorry, or you're going to get it again?
Yes.
That you just said. And then a few seconds later, the third application.
And the third application doesn't get captured by this video, is that right?
Not in this video, correct.
But you included in both 546 and 443.
Because it's contained within the larger thing, yes.
Perfect. Okay. And so I think before we discussed that you were aware that Officer Collins gave a tape recorded statement, right?
I know that a number of officers provided statements, and I did read them briefly, and then I read comments about those statements.
Okay.
Yes.
So you're aware that Officer Collins gave a tape recorded statement?
You know, I read it.
Okay.
I assume it was recorded.
Fair enough. You've read his statement, right?
Yes.
And that was given on March 9th of 2020. Are you aware of that?
No.
Objection, Your Honor, facts not evidence.
Well, he was provided with it.
Your Honor, if I can blood the witness on one issue with that.
Sure.
Mr. Fredericks, did you rely on any of the statements that were provided by the officers charged in this case?
No.
And the objection is hearsay. You didn't rely on it as an expert.
I'm not sure about it. I'm going to allow the question. If he got the statement and reviewed it, does he recall the date of the interview?
Do you recall?
No.
Okay. But you've also reviewed Officer Burbank's statement as well?
Briefly, to just simply say, I recall reviewing it. I don't recall the content.
Fair enough. Are you aware that that was done on March 6th of 2020?
No.
Okay. When were these videos made public? When did we first get these? Do you know?
No.
If I told you they were in June of 2020, would that be consistent with information you provided by the AG's office?
I only know when I got them.
Okay.
I don't know when they got them.
All right. Fair enough. In reviewing the officer's statements, you would agree they were consistent with what we saw on the video?
Objection, Your Honor.
I'll sustain that objection.
In reviewing the officer's statements, did you see anything that was inconsistent with what you saw in the video?
Same objection, Your Honor.
If he can answer that, it could be they didn't make a, sounds like you may not have made a significant comparison.
Your Honor, I think it goes to, my response might not be appropriate. I have an opinion based on, counsel's asked me, have I reviewed the video and reviewed the statements, and do I agree and where do I disagree? I feel uncomfortable. I think that's a jury question.
Well,
There's
I think the question is there anything in the videos that is inconsistent with any of the statements? Whether you may draw a different conclusion
a
from them.
lot. I can answer the question. I don't know if you want me to.
Well, it's yes or no. Are they consistent or inconsistent?
Well, that's not the question you asked me. You asked me where. But yes, it's inconsistent.
Well, I think the question was, is there anything inconsistent?
That was my question.
Is there anything inconsistent? Yes.
Okay. Well, you don't know when they were given, so I'll withdraw that question. Okay, so after the Cowden video, which ended after McDowell, is that correct?
Yes.
All right, and so after the Cowden video, we have no visual evidence of what's transpiring between Mr. Ellis and the two officers, do we?
No visual evidence, correct.
And I think you played, at least in, what was it, in 443, there's some audio that's apparently captured by some other source, right?
Partly by the Vivint and from dispatch.
And you can hear them still struggling, fair?
Yes.
And so we don't have any visual information as to when the handcuffs were actually applied to Mr. Ellis after the Cowden video, right?
Correct.
Because they weren't applied, as far as we could tell, during anything that Mr. Cowden recorded.
Unclear.
Unclear?
Yes. I can't say whether it was or not on one hand.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
So it's fair to say we don't know when they were actually secured to Mr. Ellis in that time frame?
Yes.
And we don't know if Mr. Ellis was resisting during this time frame?
I'm not qualified to answer that question.
Okay. Well, we
That's
certainly
a
don't-
force issue.
Well, we certainly don't have any video showing what Mr. Ellis was doing. Would you agree with that?
At what time?
After the Cowden video?
Correct.
Okay. And so we don't have any information about when he was actually secured.
No visual information,
All
correct.
right. Well, we do have some information about when hobbles were requested relative to the Cowden video, right?
Yes.
And I wrote down that hobbles were requested at 23:24:39. Is that consistent with your timeline? And if you need to look at 18A, I think it contains that in there.
Mr. Russell, could you please repeat your time?
Sure. 23:24:39.
'23, 24, 24?
I wrote down 23:24:39. And where I got that, Mr. Fredericks, is actually the compilation, and I'll hand it to you, 18A, that Mr. Hallamore created in conjunction with you to create the timeline.
Thank you.
Do you recognize that?
Yes.
Okay. And so if you look at page 4 of 6 of 18A, do you see the entry 23, 24, and 33 seconds?
33 seconds.
Yep.
Yes.
And that's where Officer Collins says, can someone bring some hollows? Right?
Yes, that's correct.
And so how long after the Cowden video does Officer Collins make the request for hobbles?
I'll take a look.
If you can. You might have referred to 443.
I'm going to refer to 33A.
Okay.
Thank you. Minute and 35 seconds.
All right, just so I understand what I asked you and what you answered. After Cowden video, a minute and 35 seconds, you said?
Yes.
Officer Collins asked for the hobbles.
Yes.
All right. And we don't know what's happening during that minute and 35 seconds. Visually, I guess.
Visually, we don't know. We have some audio where we hear "I can't breathe" a few times.
Okay. At 23:24:47, after the request for hobbles, we have Sergeant Lim saying they're still fighting one, don't we?
At 23:24:47, there is a broadcast that says Ainsworth. Something precedes that is unintelligible, and then it says Ainsworth. They're still fighting with one.
All right, and do you know that TPD 092 is Sergeant Lim? Do you know that?
I think so.
Okay.
Yes.
So at least according to your work with Mr. Hallamore, Sergeant Lim is now on scene saying they're still fighting with them.
I'm uncertain whether he's on scene or not, but I think that's his broadcast.
All right, fair enough. Fair enough. And then, it's not till 23:25:34, so another, what, 45 almost seconds, that they're from South Sound 911 that they have Mr. Ellis detained. Do you see that?
Someone is acknowledging copy. It says one retained, still need a beeper.
Correct. And then TPD 092, again, Sergeant Lim at 23:25:45 says, yeah, go ahead and start fire to check them out, right?
Yes.
Okay. So within seconds of saying we've got them detained, they're communicating to send fire, is that right?
11 seconds, yes.
This morning you said that you, well, let me ask this because it wasn't clear to me. Either you didn't review or were not provided Ayanna White or Ms. Malong's statements in this case?
I don't have a recollection of reading her statement.
Okay. Are you aware that she has stated that she heard the commotion between Mr. Ellis and the officers anywhere between 1 minute and 30 seconds and 2 minutes before the video started recording for Ms. McDowell?
Objection, Your Honor, mischaracterized her statement testimony.
Well, that's exactly what she said on cross-examination.
So, I'm sorry, if I understand you correctly, that the witness in the house knows when Ms. McDowell's video was recorded, and she says she heard before that.
Well,
Is that, you're asking me to comment on that?
No, I'm asking you if you were aware that the witness in the house heard and observed the struggle between Mr. Ellis and the driver officer anywhere between 1 minute and 30 seconds to 2 minutes before she heard Ms. McDowell screaming, which is captured on her video.
Oh, I see, before she heard that. No, I'm not aware of that.
Were you aware that she placed Mr. Ellis and the driver officer on the driver front side of the vehicle in front of the headlight?
I'm unaware of what she may have stated. I certainly didn't read that anywhere, so, which leads me to believe that I did not read her statement. So I wouldn't be able to say anything about what she may have said.
Okay. And if she said that, you'd agree that what she described would have been at least 2 minutes before Mr. Cowden recorded the video that we have on the timeline, because he recorded after Ms. McDowell, right?
Objection, Your Honor, outside the scope of this witness's knowledge.
Overruled, the answer.
I can't say anything about what she may have said.
All right, let me ask you a different way. You know that Mr. Cowden started recording after Ms. McDowell, correct?
About 10 seconds.
Okay. And I asked you this last week when you testified, when you first started on 546, that first 15 seconds or so of the Vivint video, you can hear Mr. Ellis struggling with the officers, right?
The first, how long?
When it starts.
When it starts.
You can hear him struggling, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
And that's prior to McDowell.
Correct.
Yes.
I think it's at least 8 seconds before McDowell starts recording.
I
right?
think that's correct.
Okay. On both 443 and 543, we have two of the same. One has a little bit more now with McDowell, right? 443.
Yes.
Okay. On both of those, though, when we pull up that initial Vivint video, that traffic signal directly in front of the direction the officer is heading is green, correct?
Yes.
And it remains green for how long?
Well, it's green. I don't know when it became green, but I believe it's 66 seconds.
All right. And you know it's 66 seconds because you had some communication with Ms. Eats and Mr. Liu about the timing of those lights, right?
No, I know it's 66 seconds because I could see a reflection off of a lamppost that was in view of the McDowell camera that showed a green reflection off the lamppost. That was a reflection of the light. And then at one point, that green reflection turned to an amber reflection. So I know that was the transition from green to amber, but I don't know when it started.
Okay.
And I made that determination independent, and then I reported that.
Right. And you had some communication with Ms. Eats and Mr. Liu about the timing of those lights. Do you remember that?
Mr. Liu, I believe.
All right.
Yes.
Wherein they had suggested that the light is triggered by the vehicles coming down Ainsworth, that turn from green to red, right?
I had asked in the process of trying to authenticate timing, that was one of the things that I have done in the past when we're trying to determine the validity of timing on video, when we have a sequence of light changes. So multiple sequences. So I made the inquiry, is there any way we can get a data point for that? And I was provided with information that couldn't be validated.
Okay.
And so
Understood. But what we can say is that if that light is green in the direction the officers is heading, it's actually red as you're coming down Ainsworth to turn either right or left on 96, right?
Yes.
Right.
Or amber.
Okay, so if that was green in the video that we saw.
No, pardon me, you're right, green, yes. Yeah,
So in the video, you said it was 66 seconds, and it was green in the direction of the officers.
Yes.
Right? Meaning it's red as you're coming down Ainsworth to 96, as that's green, right?
yes.
Meaning the direction that Mr. Cowden is heading is a red light for at least 66 seconds before he gets there.
Well, it's, I don't know when he got there. So it's, the light is red while the light is green for 96th.
Okay.
So it's at least 66 seconds.
Well, actually, you did tell the AG's office when you thought he got there, didn't you?
Well, I know when he was there because we could see a reflection of headlights off the police vehicle. So,
Right, I'm going to show you.
so let me finish, please. So at the very beginning of the Vivint video, the side of the vehicle is illuminated by the headlights of Cowden. So he was there at that point, but I can't say when he got there.
Understood. I'm going to show you what's been marked as 2737.
Thank you.
Ask you if you recognize that.
Yes.
And 2737 is the email correspondence between you, Mr. Liu, and you CC'd Patty Eakes on this, right?
I see that, yep, from July 2nd of 2021.
Right, and in the middle of the first page of that, that's you sending the email to Kent Liu, right?
Yes.
At which you indicate if Cowden's arrival triggered the countdown for the light sequence, as per provided timing information, Cowden arrived 6.6 seconds before he started to record at about the time Ellis is taken to the ground. Isn't that what you said?
Well, this is out of context, so here's the context. The information I was provided was that the light changes based on a trigger, a weight trigger just around the stop line area that triggers it. It doesn't say anything about whether there was somebody there before, like for instance, if the light had changed to green immediately and then somebody arrives, or if somebody arrived at the green light. So it provided no basis for me to make a timing. So I said, if he had triggered it, then this is how long he'd been there. But I don't know if he'd have triggered it.
Well, the reason you said if is because Kent Liu in the previous email suggested that's when he arrived, and you said if that's when he arrived, then he arrived at about the time that Ellis was taken to the ground, right?
Yeah, review this for a second? Yeah, thanks. Well, I think you've mischaracterized the email. So Mr. Liu does not tell me when he believes he arrived. He says, based on what we were told, if he had arrived, it would have triggered.
Right.
So if he had arrived to the red light, then he would have triggered.
Well,
But we
know-
couldn't validate that.
You just told us, Mr. Fredericks, that the light was green for 66 seconds.
No, I didn't. No.
Let me finish the question.
Okay.
The light on the Vivint video is green for 66 seconds as it records, correct?
What I said was, it was green for at least 66 seconds. I don't know how long it was green for.
And if it's green for 66 seconds as we're watching, that means it's red in the direction that Mr. Cowden is coming up on, right?
Or Mr. Cowden is there and stopped already. So we don't know when he came up.
Well, if him going across the line triggers it to change, we know he didn't trigger it to change during those 66 seconds, right?
Well, see, that's the problem because we couldn't validate it because there's a police vehicle stopped on the other trigger side. So we couldn't validate how they were working together or conflicting. So the problem was we couldn't use the timing to establish when Mr. Cowden arrived. That was the
But
difficulty.
You just told us that you saw a reflection in the police view that was consistent with him arriving in that time frame, right?
No, I did not say that.
When did he arrive then?
No,
based on the
just a minute.
reflection?
Your Honor, I'd ask that you let the witness finish his answer.
So please listen to me carefully, because I'm very careful with my answers. What I said was, when the video started, his vehicle was there, because the reflection of his headlights were on the police vehicle. Not that's when he was arriving, just that he was there at that time.
Well, you can see the reflection of his headlights on the vehicle.
Not arriving.
Arriving.
Yes.
You can see it, right?
I don't want to argue with you. I'm trying to be very clear. You did say it showed him arriving, or you said that I said that. I didn't. So when the video starts, the headlights are already illuminated on the police vehicle. So I can't say when he arrived.
All right. But you do say if Cowden's arrival triggered the countdown for the light sequence as per the provided timing information, Cowden arrived 6.6 seconds before he started to record at about the time Ellis was taken to the ground, right?
Yes, so early in this investigation, the data point was, this is what I was told. And I said, well, if that's the case, then this would be the result. But we can't validate that.
Understood. But you still believe that to be true if that's the case?
There's too many dynamics. So I'm just letting him know that based on what he's told me, if that were true, here's what the results would be. However, as we discussed this case, I said, but the headlights are there. Here's the change. We can't validate when the trigger was if he came much earlier. So we don't know where in the sequence it was, and we tried to find out.
Understood. Is it fair to say the Vivint video shows the police vehicle stopped at the intersection as if it were stopped at a red light?
The position of the police vehicle in the Vivint video shows that its front tires were right behind the stop line.
Consistent with stopping at that intersection?
Yes.
And if they're stopped at a red light, based on the information you have, that means there's other traffic coming down 96, Ainsworth, turning on to 96, if it's triggered by that direction, right?
Yeah, I can't agree with that. I mean, I don't know what's occurring at that intersection. I don't disagree with you. I can't agree with it. I wasn't there. And we don't have any video to show that.
Okay. Well, you're aware that the officers indicate that there's a vehicle turning left off of Ainsworth onto 96 as they sat at a red light, right?
I'm aware of that. That's their statements, yes.
Okay. Last week I had you focus on Exhibit 546. Can you pull that back up again? That's the original timeline. It was on-
Your Honor, 546 is not the original.
It was the one we did last week. This way.
The issue is Exhibit 546. Is that correct?
That is strictly with Vivint and Cowden.
The one we admitted last week, is it not?
546 was admitted. It was admitted subject to authentication by the witness, which was Mr. Frederick.
I think that's what I said, yeah. Can you pull that up, please, Mr. President?
Yeah, one sec.
Along with 434 and 435. That's my note.
And this is just a short section. Yeah.
This is a portion of now what we admitted 443 today, or Thursday.
Yes.
One of those days. Okay. All right. And I had you walk through up to about 46 seconds. Can you get us there again?
Yes.
And can you play it with the volume? And before you do that, remember I asked you if you could hear Mr. Ellis saying, try it again or try again. Do you remember that conversation?
I do.
Can you get to that location, please?
Try again. Go around.
We talked about that at length the last time you were here.
Yes.
Remember that? And you'd indicated on cross-examination you weren't sure what he was saying there. Do you remember saying that?
I do.
You actually worked with Mr. Hollamore in producing a transcript of that sound, didn't you?
Yes.
In fact, you were part of an email chain with Hattie Eakes, Mr. Hollamore, Kent Lou, Sue Peters, Henry Phillips, discussing the accuracy of Mr. Hallamore's transcripts relative to your creation of the timeline. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And in fact, in those emails that you're a part of, actually, let me show them to you so you know what I'm talking about.
Thank you.
I'm going to show you what's been marked 2539 defense exhibit. And just orient yourself to it real quick.
Do you have a page?
Sure. Well, the first page
Okay.
is who you're corresponding with. That's where I was starting.
This is 2539.
2539.
2539, okay, thank you.
Yes.
And so,
The first page, I was copied on the first number of pages.
right, and generally, Mr. Fredericks, this is a series of emails with the group I just discussed and drafts of the transcripts Mr. Hallamore was attempting to create to incorporate into what's now been known as 443.
No, these are his drafts, which I didn't incorporate into 443.
Well, you were trying to incorporate the timing of each of the videos relative to these drafts.
The timing,
Yes?
yes,
Okay.
yeah.
So what I mean by that is you had several sources that you were lining up on this synchronized timeline, and Mr. Hollamore was doing the transcripts of that while you were creating the visual. Is that fair?
Yes, and we were in the process of validating the times, and we hadn't finished the testing yet
Yep.
to validate the times.
Right, to
Yes.
include the taser information.
Right. These are accurate as far as linear runtime, which means that the distance between, or the timing between one event and another event. But as far as the accuracy of the time of day, I don't know if we've established that yet.
Fair enough.
Okay.
But generally, you were working together to incorporate both the sound and the visual into one timeline.
That's correct.
All right, and had to verify the accuracy of both before you put this exhibit together, right?
Yes, and this exhibit was done sometime after this, quite some time after this, I think. Yes.
Okay, and you agree that Mr. Hallamore had determined that during the portion that I asked you about last week, that Mr. Ellis is saying, try again, right?
I think he says there's a grunt and something indiscernible. Then he says, I think it says try it again, and then indiscernible.
Okay.
Yeah. So, for me, the context is lost. I'm leaving that to him.
Okay, but you would agree that you reviewed that and had indicated that, at least on page, if you look at the bottom base numbers, 0102179. Are you with me?
Yes.
That's an email from you to Sue Peters, who's another state expert in this case, right?
Yes.
In which you basically say, well, you can read it, but the timing is matched. You match the timing of the transcript with the video, and it's accurate, as I think your bottom last sentence is, all broadcasting timing in David's transcript will remain as is. You see that?
I do. Yes.
Meaning that you confirmed that that correlated with the video and was accurate.
I believe at that time, yes. That was June the 5th.
So as of June 5, you had reviewed the transcript and confirmed that it was accurate and matched the times on the exhibits that we now made, right?
No, it's not what I said. The timing is accurate. I'm not I didn't make the assumption that his transcript is accurate. It's his evidence.
Fair enough. But the timing of when he says, Mr. Ellis says, try again, matches up with what I had you look at last week or 2 weeks ago, right?
I believe the timing is, yes.
All right. And the timing was second, I'm sorry, after the first taser, but before the second. Is that right?
Yes.
So according to your sync timeline with Mr. Hallamore, after the first taser application wears off, Mr. Ellis says, try again, and then the second taser application is administered. Is that right?
Again, you're asking me to agree to the transcript in that question. You just said, Mr. Ellis says this. So the transcript reflects that he says that. That's correct.
Well, we've heard it 20 times in court. You disagree with that he says, try again?
That was the same question we discussed last week, that I'm not qualified to comment on the accuracy of the transcript.
Okay.
That's Mr. Hallamore's evidence.
All right, and that coincides with where I've said it.
Yes.
Occurs in your video. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Last line of question. So I think last time you were here, you were talking about your hourly rate on this case. What is your hourly rate?
It depends on what kind of work I'm doing.
Okay, well, how many hours have you worked on this case?
Several hundred.
Okay. And, well, what do you plan to invoice the state for the entirety of your work that you've completed on this case?
I'm not sure yet because I'm not finished, but I've traveled back and forth, which includes the cost of airfare and hotels and the work that's been done here. I don't know, it's probably going to be 50, maybe a bit more than that. I don't know. Depends.
All right, so.
Yeah. Yes, probably going to be around 50, maybe a bit more. I don't know. Yeah.
And so, just so I understand, the 50 or more would include the work you did plus interviews and trial testimony and travel. It's kind of everything together.
Flights, everything, all expenses, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So 50, but maybe more than 50.
Yes.
Thank you. That's all I have to say.
Mr. Conrad or Ms. Bremner?
Mr. Conrad.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
I don't have much for you, believe it or not. Guess I can just stand right here. I could just. So I wanted to talk to you about kind of an overall idea and picture of our client, Officer Rankin's involvement in all of this. And since you've reviewed kind of all the reports, the communications, you might be a good person to ask. So Exhibit 443 is the synchronized video and audio compilation that you've created, right?
Yes.
Okay. And that includes the Vivant videos that you have.
Yes.
It includes the McDowell video as well, right?
Yes.
The Cowden video.
Yes.
And then it includes a number of dispatch communications which you've woven in within the different audio pieces of those video.
Yes, all the dispatch that occurred to or from the area was included.
Okay. And so the video that you have, the Vivant video that you have, and can you pull up 443 for us?
Yes.
Okay. And permission to publish, Your Honor.
Proceed.
Excuse me.
So the Vivant video, or sorry, this compilation video that you've created, it starts, and if you could start it, starts at 23, 21, 41, right?
Yes.
Okay. And we know obviously at this point that Officer Burbank and Officer Collins are engaged with Mr. Ellis, or that that they're engaged with him.
Yes.
Okay. And so, obviously, Mr. Ossier has questioned you about what Miss Mullane said, formerly known as Miss White, with regard to when she first heard the commotion outside, and you're not aware of that. Though.
Correct.
Okay. So, and then you have, 23, 21, 41 is when your video starts. And then you've listened to all the radio dispatch communications, right?
All the dispatch communications that originated at this intersection or were where there's communication from somebody at the intersection.
Yeah.
Yes.
You probably got the big file from South Sound 911 with a number of dispatch communications, right?
From different areas.
From different areas.
Yes.
From them communicating with fire.
Yes.
From them communicating with Washington State Patrol.
Yes.
From them
Well,
communicating.
them being being dispatch.
You're right,
Yes.
dispatch. South Sound 911 communicating with fire, with Washington State Patrol, with Linwood
Yes.
PD, letting all these agencies know that there is.
Did you say Linwood?
Sorry, is it Linwood?
Did you mean Lakewood?
Oh, sorry,
Lakewood.
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 My apologies. We're getting there.
Go ahead.
Lakewood, and letting all these agencies know that there's a priority event at 96 in Ainsworth.
Yes.
Okay. And what starts that are these mic clicks, right?
That's my understanding.
Okay, so there's mic clicks that are coming from Officer Burbank or Officer Collins, and dispatch asks them for an update. What's going on with your mic, right?
Yes.
And they don't get any response.
Yes.
And that's the same information that's communicated over dispatch to other officers that might be listening in. Right?
Yes.
Okay. And then all of a sudden you hear Officer Burbank over the microphone saying 96 in Ainsworth.
Yes.
Nothing else.
Yes.
Okay. And then dispatch responds back and says, what's going on, but no response.
Yes.
And there's still a couple other mic clicks that are going on, right?
I think that's correct.
And they say that dispatch says there's unknown trouble at 96 in Ainsworth, and they send out a priority beeper or a tone over the radio, right?
I think so, yes.
Okay. And so this is all going on over dispatch. And then you have, and I think you just covered this with counsel, then you have at 23:24:33 a request for hobbles. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. 23:24:33 request for hobbles. And then if you can play the video and get to the portion of when my client actually arrives. And I think that's at 23:24:35. Our client, sorry, Officer Ray. I get in trouble sometimes.
Moment, please. I'm going to try to do something to get me there quicker. Let me ask me this. One second. And 22,
23,
23.
24, 35.
Okay, it's coming up in about 5 seconds.
Okay, someone bring some hobbles.
Okay. So you hear that? And then my client's not on scene yet, is that right?
No. When that broadcast is being made, that's when we see the Vivint starts to record,
Yeah.
and this is the two officers exiting the vehicle.
Okay. And can you point out where Officer Rankin is?
I think Officer Rankin's the driver, is that correct?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay.
Right here. The car door is just closing, and he's moving up.
Okay. Could you pause right there?
Yes.
Okay. So prior to our client Officer Rankin arriving, just to summarize, the mic clicks have happened, right?
Yes.
The 96 in Ainsworth call out has happened.
Yes.
No responses from Officer Burbank or Officer Collins have happened, right?
Yes.
Then you have the McDowell video, all that's going on with Miss McDowell's video, that's all happened, right?
Yes.
Our client is not on scene yet.
Correct.
Then you have the Cowden video as well that's depicting whatever's going on in Cowden, right?
Yes.
Okay. And then you have the request for hobbles, and then our client officer Rankin arrives, right? He's just outside of the vehicle at this point, and what's the time on it?
23, 24, 35.
Okay. And from 23, 21, 41, which is the start, to 23, 24, 35, and I think I actually asked you this question last time you were here and got the math on it wrong. 2 minutes and 54 seconds.
Correct.
Okay, so 2 minutes and 54 seconds have gone by where these officers, Officer Burbank and Officer Collins, or at least under this video timeline, have been struggling with Mr. Ellis.
They've been in contact with Mr. Ellis for that period of
Okay.
time.
And then if you keep going forward on this video, and then if you could pause it at 23, 24, 55, so in about 20 seconds.
Yeah, you got your left.
Okay, and at this point, other officers are also arriving on scene, right?
Yes.
And that's what we're seeing, them coming from on 96. They're heading west.
East.
Well, they're heading east from west
Yes.
towards where presumably Mr. Ellis and these officers are.
Yes.
Okay, so about 20 seconds after our client officer Rankin gets on scene, 20 seconds go by and other officers are also arriving on scene.
Yes.
Okay. All right. The last set of questions I have for you, Mr. Fredericks, is about kind of the validation and timing of how you created this compilation. And I want to make sure that my understanding is correct. So you get videos from obviously all these different sources.
Yes.
And each video has a different time and date that's embedded within the metadata of the video to which you receive, right?
Except the Cowden video.
Except the Cowden video didn't have any metadata.
Right.
So you couldn't look at the metadata and say when it was created or what the date was or anything like that.
Not independent of any other videos. Correct.
Correct. So then you took these differing videos and you try and sync them up so that you can have them running at the same time to show the same timing of events. That simplifies it, I know, but we're gonna get there, I promise.
Yes, it simplifies
Okay.
it.
So an example is the amber light on the officer's car.
Yes.
So you see this amber light kind of flashing, right?
Yes.
And that's an amber light that you can see at times on Miss McDowell's video.
Yes.
You can see it on Mr. Cowden's video
Yes.
at times. And you can see it on the Vinet video, right?
Yes.
And you were able to essentially see when that amber light is flashing on these three different videos and sync them up so that the flashing light is present at the same moments on each individual video.
No.
Okay, where'd I go wrong?
So the McDowell video is recording 30 frames per second. That's 33.3 milliseconds between images. And it grabs an image in about 8 milliseconds, so very quickly. The Cowden video, once it was uploaded to social media, the result was that the video is now approximately 15 frames per second, so that's every 66 milliseconds, with some dropped out images. And that's just the nature of uploading something to social media and all the things that happen to it. So there's two streams of media that would be on his camera, one video stream, one audio stream. The audio was stripped out, which is often a result of uploading to social media. The point is that when Cowden's video grabs an image every 66 milliseconds for about 8 milliseconds of light, the likelihood that the McDowell video and the Cowden video grab the same 8 milliseconds at the same moment in time, and then McDowell video grabs an image and then later on they both grab the same image at the same moment in time is like not going to happen.
Yeah.
So the flashing of the lights once in a while, they're going to actually capture it very close to the same time, including the Vivint video, which has the same struggle with timing for images. So once in a while, after it's been synchronized based on all the other things, then I can look for other observations that help to validate the timing and everything, which would be, can I find something consistent? And I did occasionally, as I'm looking at the video, go, oh, here's a moment when they all did grab something at the same moment in time, out of hundreds of images. And that would be, there's the flash of the amber light that strikes a part of a house. And they all capture that same moment in time. And then as we go through, the next flash, you know, the light is captured 10 milliseconds or 30 milliseconds later on one image than it is on the other. So we're within, in these images, you know, plus or minus, you know, 30 to 50 milliseconds in timing.
Okay.
If that makes sense?
No, that makes sense. And
So
so
they're not exactly at the same moment in time.
because of how they're capturing it, frames per second might be different amongst the different devices.
Yes.
Okay. And what also might be different amongst the devices is what the time or date that's showing within the metadata of each source as well, right?
It could be, yes.
So an example is the Vivint video that was done on UTC time, is that right?
Well, UTC is just a reference time.
Sure.
Yes.
But it showed a time within the metadata of that video, of the Vivint video, that you, through your validation process and syncing it together, you determined that actually the timing that's embedded within that video is not actually accurate. I think you said it was like 1.7 seconds off of what the metadata showed of it.
Yeah, 1.6 or yes,
I think
off a
your report
bit.
shows it. If you need to refresh your recollection.
No,
of the
it's
report.
not perfectly right on.
Okay, so the what's given to you in terms of the metadata of the video, which shows a date and time, you determine that that's actually not completely accurate based on your validation process.
Well, basically the Vivint videos and the cell phone videos sample the time from the cell at some point during the recording.
it
and
pings it, right?
It pings it, and it says at this point, here's the time. It knows the length of the clip. So at the very end of the file, the cell phone videos say, here's the location it happened, and here's the time that it happened.
Yep.
The Vivint video, the same kind of thing, and it says, based on UTC, so that's Greenwich Mean Times, 8 hours different from our time, this is the time during the clip, the 30-second clip, some point during the 30-second clip, this is the time of day. So therefore, in order to validate these things, we wanted to use a better way to get down to the second. And so that was done with the broadcast,
Yep.
the taser application, and then with the synchronization.
Okay. So you're taking what's presented to you within the metadata of these videos and audio sources and validating it based off of controls that you know are actually accurate, like the radio dispatch that
Yes.
you did. So the radio dispatch, you took the same radio, you communicated on it with your fancy timer gadget,
Yes.
and then you determined when I'm hitting the radio and talking, that's the time that's on it, and you validate it through that process to determine that, yes, when I hit the radio, it actually plays at this point.
Yes.
Right?
And
then-
the same with the taser. Same
and the
concept.
same with the tasers.
Yes.
But for Miss Moulin, formerly known as White, you had nothing that you could validate her video with, right?
Well, no, she has metadata
She
in her
does.
recording
She
that
does.
provides a time of day.
Okay, but you couldn't compare it to like the Cowden video. Right?
Correct.
You couldn't compare it to the the McDowell video.
Correct.
You couldn't compare it to any dispatch audio or recordings.
Correct.
You couldn't compare it to taser applications.
It's correct.
So the only thing that you had to go off of was the metadata contained within her video file, right?
Yes.
And based off of that date and time within her video file is where you put it within your synchronization video.
Yes.
Okay. but you don't know whether the video, the date and time within the metadata in there, whether it pings off a certain source, whether that source is completely accurate or not. Is that fair?
Well, my experience is that the time and date recorded on the cell phone ping tower, I mean, it's used for billing purposes and all sorts. So my experience is that it's accurate to within the length of time of the recording. So sometime during the recording, it pinged it, got a time, and registered that time. So I relied on that.
Okay.
And the same, and with the McDowell video, the same process, and the McDowell video was synchronized to the other sources.
But McDowell is a different boat, right? Because you're able to compare it to other video files in order to sync it up with them.
It's just another validation point.
Sure,
Yes.
but
Mhm.
you didn't have another validation point with Miss Mullane, Miss White's video.
Except that she recorded an event, her clock purported, when it was recorded, that the scene was, there were a lot of officers at the scene. I think there's an image when there was no fire, and then an image when there was fire, and the dispatch shows that certainly between those two recordings, fire appeared. So there was something to say, first of all, it's authentic, it's the right time, approximate time of day, and location, so that's part of the authentication.
Sure.
And it matches with the arrival of the other units.
Well, that's a period of time that you don't have any other video, though.
Correct, yes,
A number of minutes.
yes.
Okay. So essentially, you are using again the video source information, the metadata, and using that as a determination of where it should go within your synchronization.
I relied on that to determine where it would go, and then I looked at the visual content. Does it make sense within the reporting? And it did. And I haven't come across a cell phone video from an Apple phone where it's reported a time that's been grossly inaccurate.
Okay. But so the time on my phone, an Apple phone, may be different than the time on your phone, right?
By maybe a few seconds.
Okay. But that all depends on what my clock settings are, right?
No, if you take a video,
Sure.
it's going to be sampling, it'll be pinging the tower, right? Or it'll be pinging, it pings to establish the time of day, and it does it multiple times. So I suppose if you didn't use your phone for a few months, it might have an offset, but it wouldn't be very much.
Okay. That's all I have.
Sure.
Appreciate it.
Redirect.
Mr. Fredericks, you were asked by Mr. Officer if there was anything inconsistent that you observed in the videos, inconsistent with the officer's statements. Do you recall that line of
Actually,
questioning?
Your Honor, I'm going to object to the way it's worded. It was one officer, not all the officers.
I'll rephrase. You were asked by Mr. Officer if there was anything inconsistent in your viewing of the videos with Defendant Collins' statement.
Yes.
You recall that line of questioning?
Yes.
What did you observe and note in the videos that was inconsistent with Defendant Collins' statement?
My recollection of the officer's statement was that he said that Mr. Ellis was, and I'm going to paraphrase here, correct me if I'm wrong, but was
Testify to his recollection, Your Honor.
Just ask the state to correct him if he's wrong about his recollection.
Ladies and gentlemen, please excuse us for the conversation. Please do not discuss the case.
Sit down.
Sure.
Thanks.
Please be seated, everyone. All right, let's do an offer of proof. What were you going to say, Mr. Frederick?
Oh, I'm sorry.
You can stay seated if you want to turn your mic on.
Yes.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe Officer Collins said,
That Mr. Ellis was kicking and was flailing about and was fighting. And the observations of the video shows that where, in almost all of the occasions where Mr. Ellis was moving his legs and what I would understand to be flailing was while he was being tased. So I found that that was inconsistent with the statements because they weren't describing the times when he was being tased as the times he was also fighting.
Is there anything else that you found inconsistent with Defendant Collins' statement?
I think the description of the timing of the application of the, I'm going to call it the vascular neck restraint or the LVNR, and how it was being done, but I think that the video is not consistent with his description. But, Your Honor, that kind of goes a little bit beyond my area of expertise to how the application is being done. So I think that I should be cautious about that.
And at any time, did you see Mr. Ellis lift up Officer Collins and throw him down in the video?
Not in the video, no.
And at any times, did you see Mr. Ellis swinging wildly at Officer Collins or at Officer Burbank?
Not in the video.
At any time, did you see Mr. Ellis sprint up and chase the passenger?
Not in the video, no.
And at any time, did you see Mr. Ellis do a running kick?
Not in the video, no.
Did you, at any time in the video, see Mr. Ellis throwing the officer off of him, off of himself?
I thought the inquiry was, what did my client say, not is what the state saying is there. So, does you recall my client saying any of the things that Ms. Nicolavo just suggested he said?
And these are pulled directly from the statement.
The question is, what does he recall from the statement, not what do you pull from the statement?
well, I don't know, this is kind of angels on the head of a pin here. Presumably he looked at the statement. He was asked generally about the statement. He was asked to compare it generally to the video. So continue.
No.
Did you ever see Mr. Ellis sprint and chase the passenger officer into the intersection?
Not in the video, no.
Your Honor, I don't think that statement's from Collins' statement.
It's not.
And that's what she's intermixing statements here.
Could be.
But I didn't ask those questions.
I know. You sure it was Collins' statement?
Your Honor, I'll pull it directly from it, make sure that everything that is asked is from Collins' statement.
Well, have you got anything
In my
more?
notes, I have from Collins' statement.
Before you go there, have you got anything more?
You ever see Mr. Ellis run about 10 to 15 feet and collide with Officer Burbank?
No.
And did you ever see in the video Mr. Ellis strike Officer Burbank in the mouth?
No.
And did you ever see Mr. Ellis in a fighting stance
No.
towards Mr. Collins?
No.
No, that's what I have for what the video would have potentially captured. Well, what I mean by that, Your Honor.
I know what you mean. I know what you mean. I know what you mean.
Well, I do believe,
Mr. Osser is the one that made the objection here. You wish, go ahead.
How long was the video that we saw?
Which video?
How about, let's start with the McDowell. Let's start with Exhibit 20, the first one.
Yeah, 19 seconds or something, and
15 seconds, you didn't see any of the things that Ms. Nicolavo suggested were said by my client?
my understanding of the question, your question and her question, was to respond to what I read and what I recalled in the officer's statement about the events depicted. For instance, as she said, in the statement it says Ellis kicked Officer Burbank into the intersection. That was not on the video. There was a statement about flailing and kicking, which I described. And the time period that is being described in the statement describes the time that's covered by the McDowell and the Cowden videos. It describes the flailing and moving of the legs, and that's at the time period during the tasing. So,
Sure. My client describes a taser application about 3 or 4 times, right?
yes,
That's in the video, right?
yes,
He describes Mr. Ellis forcibly throwing them off, which is between the second and third application, if you believe that to be true, right?
but that's inconsistent with, that goes to your question, what's inconsistent? That would be an inconsistent. He's not thrown off.
Well, the video speaks for itself, right? That portion is captured in the video, right?
Yes, but you asked me if I disagreed. I disagree. He's not being thrown off.
Okay. You don't know what's happening before the video starts, right?
Correct.
And we know there's interaction between the officers and Mr. Ellis for up to 2 minutes before the video starts, if you believe Ms. Malong, right?
Well, I mean, you're asking me to believe something I haven't heard, but all I can say is that I agree with you that the activity started before the video showed it.
Right. For instance, Ms. Nicolavo asked if somebody ran at Officer Burbank. That could have happened before that video was recorded, right?
If yes, there's activity that occurred before the video was recorded
Okay.
that I can't comment on, but you asked me that according to the statements, did I disagree with anything I saw in the video based on his statement. His statement covered areas that were covered by the video, so that's of course the only thing I can disagree with, if I disagreed.
And so we're talking about just that 18 seconds of video. Is that what you're talking about?
No, talking about the compilation of the 2 videos, McDowell, and so it's a bit longer than that. It's
Okay.
quite a bit longer than that.
So the 18 seconds we can see on her initial video, Exhibit 20, right?
Yes,
And then she turns away so we can't see anything, right?
yes.
And then
I'd have to look at the timing. I just guessed on the 18 seconds. It's a
Ballpark.
bit more than that, but yeah.
ballpark. Then 21 shows her driving by, and we can certainly see some of what is captured in
Yes.
that interaction, right?
Yes,
And that's the extent of her video.
yes,
And then Mr. Cowden overlaps with Exhibit 21, right?
yes,
The same time period with a little bit more.
and 22
Yep.
overlaps.
Okay. And so maybe a minute or so total of visual of the interaction between Officer Collins, Burbank, and Mr. Ellis?
Might be a bit more than that, but not much.
All right. And you know that the officers described a 3, 4, or even up to 5-minute altercation with Mr. Ellis, right?
I don't know the time period that they're described before the video starts, but I can only talk about the video. But just to your question, you asked me based on the video, do I disagree with what I see in the statement? So that's all I was answering.
No, that's not my question. My question is, you understand, based on reading their transcripts, they described this altercation lasting up to 5 minutes.
Yeah, I don't know what their start point was, though. But I agree that they gave a time. I don't recall exactly what the time was. But I was just responding to your question earlier, not to
Mr. Frederick, I
that
know
question.
You said that 4 times. I understand that.
Yeah.
The question is, they've described an altercation with Mr. Ellis for up to 5 minutes, and there's about a minute or a little bit more than a minute of actual video that we have, right?
Yes.
Okay, that's all I have, Judge.
one follow-up on that.
Sure.
The statements made by Ms. Nicolavo, Do you know, and that you're referencing, do you know whose statement it came from as you sit here today? Whether it was Collins, Burbank, combination of the two, or somebody else?
I think the officer statements were fairly close together, so I'm thinking of them collectively. I can't remember which officer said exactly what, but I believe that Collins described the kicking motion, the fighting motion.
And that's all, as you sit here today, you recall?
Uh,
Specifically to Officer Collins?
No, I think I read that in both statements. But I can't at this point give a verbatim of what I read in both statements.
Or I forget. Okay, that's all I have, Your Honor. I would still have mine to say in the projection unless it's restricted to a specific statement.
Any further?
Your Honor, sorry.
Anything further, Mr. Colombo?
Your Honor, the state intends to introduce only the statements that would be inconsistent that were offered by Defendant Collins. That was the parameters of the question. And I believe that the defense's question opened the door to that. And he's gone, Mr. Rosser has asked multiple questions about, well, there's other time that wasn't captured on video. And that's all weight admissibility questions that we can certainly recross on.
I would ask that the law actually point out what she's saying is for my client, because it's not. Most of the questions she asked came from Burbank's statement, not my client's statement.
Well, I'm simply not going to let her go there. Here's the reason why. An infelicitous question, I think it's fair to say. I said it's an infelicitous question. A bad idea. But the problem with it is most of the inconsistencies I've heard about from the witness could well have been, as has been suggested by the questioning here, have been things that took place outside the video. So the video doesn't neither confirms nor detracts from them at all. If there was something expressly in the video that was definitely different from something that Officer Collins said, that'd be one thing. But to the extent that there's the possibility that things he said that are not contained in the video could have or did occur outside the video, doesn't mean there's anything inconsistent about it. So I think this is more substantially prejudicial than probative. Mr. Frederick has already answered the question by saying, in so many words, he did see inconsistencies, and that's sufficient for the state's purpose here. So we're not going to go any farther into that. Anything further for the witness?
Of this witness?
Yeah,
For the day, or
for the day.
we're calling it good for the day, then no, but.
No, I'm asking, do you have anything more for
Do
the
I have
witness?
more questions of him for
Yeah.
for redirect? Yes.
Yeah, how much?
Probably a good 15, 20 minutes.
Well, as I told you, I got to leave at 2:30, and it is now 2:35. So, tell me you can take care of it for you. So if you've got another 15 minutes, by the time we get through all that, it's going to be too late for me. So we're going to, sadly, Mr. Frederick, I wish we could have got you finished today, but we didn't. So let the jury know that we're recessed for the day. Thank you.